My guest today is Travis Orbin. Travis is the drummer for Darkest Hour. He has also performed or recorded with the likes of Periphery, Sky Eats Airplane, Intervals, The Heart Machine, Nick Johnston, and many, many others. He has been featured multiple times in Modern Drummer magazine and has received the highest praise from some of the world's greatest drummers. Travis has just released his 10th solo release entitled Finite III, links to which you can find below. Travis is a fantastic drummer and human being, and it was a real pleasure speaking with him. So please enjoy this conversation with Travis Orbin. So Travis, thanks for being here with me today.
You got it. Thanks for having me, man.
So how does it feel to have drummers like Virgil Donati saying such nice things about you?
Utterly surreal. I mean, I can't put it in any other way. It was Mangini. I first received praise from him, and that was crazy, and I didn't know what to do with that. And then I appear on Virgil's website, and it's just like, well, I guess I can die now.
Yeah, man. And it seems like a lot of your career blossomed out of your YouTube channel. Of course, you were playing in bands and stuff before that, I believe. But did you ever expect that it would lead to this and everything that's happened?
No. I didn't have any expectations when I started posting on YouTube, and of course YouTube was in its nascent stages, so there was no telling how many ears and eyes it would flourish to. But I was just posting just to get my name out there and kind of show people a taste of what I could do. So yeah, like I said, just surreal that it's captivated people in such high esteem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you've definitely earned it. I mean, I know that you've worked very hard for all of that. And it seems that this drumming and music thing has been pretty much around for your whole life, as far as I'm aware. And in fact, I was browsing through your website last night, preparing for this conversation, and I came across an anecdote in one of your biographies where I believe your parents went to a concert right before you were born. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Would you mind telling that story?
So evidently my parents went to a concert, and at one point during the performance, I had begun kicking in my mother's womb to the beat of the music.
For some reason, that doesn't surprise me.
Hopefully the drummer on stage had good time. No.
Yeah, right. Well, they must have had a really good time.
Yeah. But yeah, this is obviously an anecdote, and I don't know how true it is, but that's what she claims.
Nice. Yeah, so I mean, it's fun to speculate about that kind of stuff. That brings up a whole question about, talent versus work, and maybe that's something we can get into later. But in any case, this has been a constant thread throughout your life. So speaking of your career and everything you're doing, you have been very busy. You're one of the most productive musicians I know. And during this lockdown period alone, in the last month, you've released 2 records, and you're now releasing a third. And did I see somewhere that you have also written an additional album in addition to that will come out later?
Yes. I started writing another. It will be more than likely the conclusion of the Project series, which was my first solo EP back in 2014, and then I put out Projects 2 in 2016. Yeah. So more than likely it'll be the conclusion of that string of releases, and it's a full length. And yeah, I started writing it, I believe, in late February, and so right when all the COVID-19 stuff was starting to really take shape here in the States. So in the thick of quarantine, I wrote this, and I've got half the record's drums tracked, and I'm currently rehearsing the second half.
Okay, awesome.
So if everything works out, everything's if all the various musicians' schedules converge in the right place, maybe I can put out 4 records this year.
Oh man, that'd be amazing. So you've got a few different series of EPs and albums. Like you've got the projects collection, then you've got the Silly String and Silly String Redux, and you've got the what am I missing? Finite.
Finite, yeah.
Yeah. What is the common thread within each of those individual things, or what differentiates those projects from one another?
Well, projects, I'll start with that since that was my first release and the first batch of songs I started writing. I started writing that material with one voice, just a guitar. There was a bass, but it was just just playing the root or the octave below the guitar. It was basically acting as another guitar. So one voice
Mhm.
and a drum set. And I started writing that material when I was still in Periphery, in the hopes of perhaps using some of it in Periphery. Yeah, so by default, I mean, I started stretching out more in projects too. I started incorporating different instruments and stuff. But basically, that material is a little more aggressive, um, and angular, lots of polymeters and such. Silly String is a little more open-ended. I like to say more colorful, more playful. Uh, there are no limitations on the instruments. With Redux, the one I just released, there's a marimbist slash vibraphonist and lots of synths. Yeah, there's no cap on the instrumentation or the orchestration. And then with Finite, there's a very specific concept in place in that there are only 4 basic voices: drum set, bass guitar, synthesizer, and strings: violin,
Mm.
viola, or in the case of Finite 3, the whole thing was written and played on a 7-string electric violin.
Whoa, those
Yeah,
exist?
they do. Sophia, my violinist slash string instrumentalist, she purchased one at NAMM, or it came to find out about it at NAMM, and I believe it can go, the tuning range, it can go as low as a cello and as high as a regular
Whoa.
violin. So that
Oh,
opened
that's
up
cool.
that opened up a whole new spectrum of melodic and harmonic options.
Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I want to come back to that because that's the one that you're releasing now. But tell us first about the ones that you released a month ago,
Okay.
Finite Complete as well as Silly String Redux.
Okay, so Finite Complete is simply both Finite EPs, Finite and Finite 2, compiled onto one release. And I wanted to do that because Finite 2 actually, sequentially, it takes place inside of Finite. It goes the first 2 songs of Finite, then all of Finite 2, then the remainder of Finite. So I just wanted one neat place to put all that and point people to, like, you can start there. And
Mm-hmm.
then that is part of a whole range of releases that is essentially one big loop. Like it kind of sort of starts with Projects 2. The chord that closes Projects 2 is the one that opens Finite. So the
Mm-hmm.
releases go Finite, Silly String 2, Delectable Machinery, Finite 3, and then the end of Finite 3 actually closes with the beginning of Finite. So
Okay,
the whole
nice.
thing
It's
kind
all
of loops.
connected.
It's like a mini ovra, I think that's how you say that word. But yeah, so that will close that one loop, and then now I'm starting another one with Projects 3. But anyway, Finite Complete is, as I said, both Finites compiled onto one collection and then sequentially correct. And then Silly String Redux is what I like to say, a reimagining of my 2015 EP, Silly String. It has the
Mhm.
original 6 songs that were on that, and then it's also been supplemented with a strange kind of soundscape piece which follows the Watch Pork, the original closing
Hmm.
song, and then a giant, almost 53-minute composition that is based entirely on drum improvisation and two chord progressions, and that's simply called Redux.
Okay.
So I recut the drums for the six tunes, and then I hired a marimbist slash vibraphonist, Peter Ferry, and then Sophia also did strings on a song called Desensitization, which was originally virtual instrument. And what else? I redid all the synths. I added some other sound design decorations slash layers, and yeah, and then as I said, the two other additional songs. So that
Hmm.
you know ballooned it from a
Yeah.
EP into a full length.
Cool. And is that just one improvisation in one shot? Are you playing with a click, or are the tempos changing, or how does that work?
Okay, so this could get kind of long-winded, but
Okay, we
I
got time.
record yeah, I recorded somewhere around 3 hours of improvisation over 3 days. Now the
But
first day I used well, first I should talk about the chord progressions. The two chord progressions that cover this entire song. One is from the chorus section of Lollygag, which is on Silly String, and then the other is from I think it's the C section. It's the third section of the song of Hand of the Giant, which is the opening track on Silly String 2. Uh, it should probably be noted that the chorus of Lollygag's in 5, and the Hand of Giant is in 11. And there's actually a eighth note triplet that that occurs on the upbeat in the midst of this 11. So sometimes you can
nice.
hear that being played in the drum improvisation. Sometimes the other instruments lock onto it. Well, specifically the rhythm section. But anyway, so on the first night, I had custom clicks on my phone that had the chord progressions. So I was
Mm,
sort of soloing to, I call it melody soloing. So I had
mm,
something to actually reference. So I had the one for Lollygag and the one for Hannah Giant, and I had them at like a bunch of different tempos. I think it was like I think I started at the first tempos at 84, and then I have one at 104, 124, 144, 164, 184,
mm.
204.
All the
So
fours.
yeah, all the fours. I think I did this also on Delectable Machinery. I think it was all the twos, so I went with the fours on
Nice.
this. But anyway,
You got a coherence like between
yeah,
everything.
absolutely. So I just had these clicks on loop, and I would just solo and solo and solo until I felt like I had enough, basically, and then I move
Mm,
on to the next tempo. So I did this for all of those, and then on the same night, I also had clicks in quintuplets, so eighth note
hmm.
and 16th note quintuplets at the same tempos. Just
Mm,
static clicks now. They weren't. I wasn't referencing the melodies. So
okay.
I tracked a bunch of improv to all of that. So that was night one, and then night two, it was all static click. So I was just patched into my regular DB90, and I would just solo, play whatever. Sometimes I had the melody in my head and I would reference it, and other times I was just referencing the quarter note click. And I did that all to the same tempos. And then the third night, I also sort of did this on Collectible Machinery when I did the same experiment. I I changed up my kit a little bit. Like I pitched up the toms. I used a different snare. I used this big furry fleece
Hmm.
bass drum beater that Vic Firth makes, and I also drank an entire bottle of red wine.
Nice. Okay.
And I had soloed without a click, so it was just totally,
Oh,
you know, unhinged. And
yeah.
so that was night three, and that served as a bit of a palate cleanser, because the first two nights it was the same kit, and
Mm.
so that serves a unique purpose. But so yeah, that was all 3 nights, and once I had all the material compiled, now it was time to embark on the like I think it was like 12 days, like
Oh
10 to
man.
16 hours of editing a day just to get all this into form.
I
Um,
believe it. I mean, I know now from doing YouTube, and it's like if you film like a vlog on a tour, I come home with so many hours of footage. It's like it's such a nightmare to go through everything. But
yeah,
yeah,
I bet.
in the end, it's all worth it. So
Yeah. So yeah, then it was just a matter of assembling all of this into cohesion so that the chord progressions are fulfilled, things sound pretty cool, and yeah, like I said, it took like I don't know, 10 to 12 days just working endlessly, and then once that was done, then Greg Greenberg, who plays bass on the track and also played bass on 35 going on Infinity, which is the experiment that I had been alluding to. It's on Delectable Machinery. It's also this very similar to this, just lots of drum improv over a chord progression. He takes it and he works his magic, and he I think he took like some kind of scale finder and extrapolated like some progressions he could kind of pin his playing towards, because what he does is mostly chordal stabs. Like
mm,
he'll take into account the chords that are happening over that period of time, and then he'll pick notes that are congruent with it. So, and then I also later on I'll highlight some grooves or patterns that are like, yeah, you should break off the stabs here and actually play something cool here. So Greg is really the glue that holds all of this together.
mm,
So he did
awesome.
his thing, and then ideally I wanted synths done because Aaron Deal, uh, he really plays off of what Greg does with the stabbing, but his schedule just was too taxing at the time. So next up in the chain of events was Peter Ferry, the marimbist that I mentioned, and so at this point he had obviously my drums and um, Greg's final bass draft. It was just MIDI. It wasn't him actually playing, but he had that to reference, and then of course the synth progressions if he so chose to. So he did his thing. I think he did three or I think it was three takes, three or four of the whole thing. Um, and then came Sophia, the violinist. She also played her seven-string electric violin on this,
Yes.
and she did four takes. I remember that clearly. And then around that time, she did that actually just a couple months ago, while we were still in the thick of quarantine. And then Deal finished up the synths around then. So then, do you want me to keep going, or is
If
that
you
a good
want.
stopping
I
point?
mean, yeah, that's sure. That's great. Um,
There's more of the.
yeah.
I detail everything on my website if you want to check
Okay.
this out, fellow listeners.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. That's quite the process. So I think
The
not a lot
funny
of.
thing,
Huh? Oh, go
sorry,
ahead.
but the funny thing is, I actually set out to do, because as I said, I've done this before with Delectable Machinery, and I set out to do something like 15, maybe 20 minutes. It
Yeah. Right.
just got out of control.
Just snowballs.
Yeah.
Yeah. Totally. So yeah, I'm curious to go a little bit more in detail about your writing process, particularly with the drum parts, and also your preparation process for how you're, like you say, you're in the middle of rehearsing parts for the next album.
Mm.
Um, and I don't think a lot of people know this, but I actually played in a band a while back that you had recorded drum parts for. This was a progressive metal band called Dyed in Gray. And I can say that without a doubt, those were the hardest drum parts I have ever had to learn. I mean, it was a lot of fun, and I'm so glad I did it because I learned so much from it. But I mean, I do these videos. I like learned the Black Page or something, or I did this one this week about this crazy dubstep song that had these insane nested tuplets, and people think that's so hard, but man, it pales in comparison to some of your parts.
Well, thanks. I
um,
watched I watched that video yesterday. It was really cool, man. I enjoyed it.
oh,
And
oh,
that's the
thanks, man.
tuplets vid. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty out stuff. Um, and so let's see. I mean, that was a huge learning experience for me. But there were so many factors that were kind of working against me that kept me from getting it to the level I would have liked to if I had had more time.
Right.
And one of those is like foot speed, which you can't even really do anything about learning the parts if you don't have the speed. So like I would have to take a few years and just focus
Yeah.
on that.
There's some
But there's
things
other
that are so far out of your facility where it's just like I know how to play this, but I just can't do it right now.
right. Like I completely understand it conceptually.
Yeah.
It's just like, yeah, my muscles won't do it. But then there's other things, just like you have such a wide vocabulary, um,
Thank you.
and I sometimes felt when I was playing these parts that I was like an actor in a movie, like pretending to speak a foreign language that I didn't actually understand. Like I could imitate the sounds, and I could like, technically say the words right, but I wasn't really like I hadn't really internalized
Right.
that stuff on a deep level. And so I'm kind of curious how you develop such a broad vocabulary. And I also wanted to ask you about the writing process, but maybe we can come back to that. And I know that that's a very broad and maybe difficult question to answer. But like, did you go through that systematically, or was it like through improvisation, or just through writing things in the computer, and then you decided to learn some lick? And I can give you maybe a more specific musical example if that's helpful. But
I
yeah, just
can
curious how you developed your vocabulary.
I can address that. As you know, I write mostly in a program called Guitar Pro, so on the computer, away from the drum set, visualizing the parts, me playing the parts as I'm writing them, and even even adhering to such a what some may think is a really uh, cold analytical process, like all of your that whole confluence of nuance, like your influences, what you've listened to, what you're listening to, everything is being filtered through. And in that moment, when you're interpreting the music, like you're still improvising in a way. You're just improvising in your head, and then it's coming out via your fingertips on the
Mm,
keypad. But
totally.
so yeah, when I write stuff, it's everything that I've played and listened to being filtered through my subconscious. And so there's really no other way to put it into words like how I develop that style, I guess. It's just,
Totally.
like I said, it's just a confluence of everything, that all my influences and all that. So it starts out as a really, but I think it's cool because like I said, there's still a improvisational factor at play, but you're also analyzing the music very, you know, I don't know, analytically.
Yeah.
And you're getting into the very essence of it. So that's how I wrote all that stuff, and that's how I write a lot of stuff, even with my solo material. And
And how far out of your comfort zone do you write? Do you write mainly stuff that like, oh, I know how to do, I got that? Or do you write stuff intentionally to push yourself and like, this would be awesome, but I know I'm going to have to shed this for like a month to be able to pull it off?
yeah, it all depends on the music. If I think writing some kind of, just a random example, like a layered polyrhythm or some sort of crazy interdependence feat, if I think that's really going to serve the music, then absolutely I'll do it. But I don't know. I find that, most of the work that I get, although it's challenging, I can typically play the finished dialed in drum part at performance tempo within like, 2 rehearsal days.
Hmm.
Um, the stuff that I really probably push myself the furthest is probably my solo material. because I know, I carve out a niche of time to rehearse that stuff, and I kind of take that into account, like when I'm writing this stuff. Like I have to be able to nail it within this time. I know it's gonna suck, but I should be able to do it.
Yeah, right. And so you're doing that currently, right? You're in that
Yeah.
phase. What does that look like?
Well,
Like, what's your
okay.
schedule? And
Um, as I said before, it varies per song. With this, it varies for difficulty of song, but typically I start at, well, I guess there isn't a typically, because either I can play the thing in 1 or 2 days, or it's going to take me a week or two. But
right.
yeah, I definitely start below, like sometimes half of the performance tempo, sometimes like, I don't know, 20 to 40 BPM slower. With this stuff, I've been rehearsing it for 3 or 4 days now, so I've kind of honed in on the most difficult parts.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the most difficult part is there's a polyrhythmic interdependent part where my right side is playing eighth notes phrased in three. It's kick, floor,
Hmm.
floor, kick, floor, floor. And then the left side plays singles between the rack tom and pedal hat. And the first occurrence of this, the left side is playing eighth note triplets against the right side playing regular eighth notes,
Hmm.
which isn't so bad. But then the second occurrence of this, in this later in
Not so
this,
bad, huh?
no, later in the song, it's the left side is playing the same orchestration singles, but in eighth note quintuplets.
Oh man, is this the thing I saw on Instagram last night?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah,
So
that looks like a nasty one.
yeah, I've been starting that. The performance tempo of those two parts is 113, and I think I've been starting at 43, so 70 beats per
Mm.
minute slower, and then just like very methodically working out how everything feels, played against how one side played against the other.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's brutal.
yeah, and then other stuff, you know, like I got it to the point where I can just play to a custom click on my phone. I usually have three of them. I have the piece like 20 BPM slower, then 10, and then performance tempo. So there's some songs that I've got to that point where I can just fire up the custom clicks on the phone and drill the song that way, rather than
Mhm.
methodically going through certain parts with the DB90 and really shedding them.
Right. Yeah. Cool. Man, yeah, that's so interesting. So, now what can you tell us about Finite 3, which is the thing that you're just releasing now? I mean, it'll be out by the time people are hearing this.
Well, the same concept is applied, of course. It's just drum set, some percussion, bass guitar, synthesizers, and seven-string electric violin. As I mentioned before, I wrote everything, all of the seven-string violin parts, bearing that tuning in mind, where it can go as deep as cello, as high as a regular violin, and I also wrote all the bass parts a step lower on the five, on the lowest, on the B string as well. So rather than
Mm.
B E A D G A E A D G, just to get a little heavier if I
Mhm.
wanted to.
Absolutely.
And what else? I mean, I think this is so far my favorite release out of all of them. Um,
Mm.
I think it's the most cohesive, and I think it's the best articulated of what I've done.
Mm.
I mixed it, so I'm probably biased in that regard.
Oh man.
And I don't know, I'm just really elated at the whole thing. It came out, it couldn't have come out any better in my opinion. And it's also like, if you ask me, I'll probably post this online, so it'll be redundant at this point. But if you ask me to point to a singular project in which I've invested the most time in my
Mm.
entire career, it would be this one.
Mm. Hmm.
So
Okay.
that probably says something.
That's a big deal. Absolutely. That's a huge deal. I mean, you've released how many records at this point?
Finite 3 will be my 10th release.
Yeah. That's
So
great.
five
So
EPs and five full lengths.
yeah, it's always good when an artist is really stoked about their latest thing. When their latest release is their best thing that they've ever done.
Yeah,
Um,
I've said this before. I think that's probably a cliche sentiment for artists, but it's so true. Like I don't know, I feel like I'm doing my best stuff now by far.
cool. So you mentioned mixing stuff, and I believe I also saw somewhere that at some point you were making like zero point 0.1 dB adjustments to the mix.
Yes, sir.
Is that true?
Oh yeah, yeah. I
Okay,
mean,
okay. So
when you get into that zone, man, you can hear those little minute adjustments. They make a world of difference, especially when you. I probably have some form of OCD, so that plays into it.
what is that process like? Like, let's say you've got the mix, like you've got a basic mix. I mean, everything's already recorded, and now you're in this final adjustment phase. Like, how long does that last, and what do you do?
Oh God. Well, okay, so I finished tracking the drums late last year. It was the day after my birthday, and I the very next day immediately started on what I call large scale synth production. So I have various synth libraries on this computer that I'm talking to you through, and
Mhm.
what I'll do is I'll import the MIDI, the stuff that I wrote in Guitar Pro, and run it through this all these giant synth libraries. Basically, find something for each voice because with Finite, I wrote three different synth voices. One was they're all very basic, but one is for sawtooth, another is for square, another is this other one called charang. So
Mhm.
I had kind of a specific vision for what each of those general voices, what I wanted them to sound like. So I would just run the MIDI endlessly through these libraries and pick things that I liked. There were also some pads as well, of course. So once I had this giant conglomeration of sounds, then it was uh, now I had to upload them into Pro Tools and hear how they sounded against the drums and pick out like what
Mhm.
actually works and what doesn't, and then EQ everything and blot out the nasty frequencies and such. So each general layer, like the sawtooth, square, etc., is actually comprised of like 6 to 10 voices. So
Yeah.
it's lots of I guess sound design going on. And then so that was the large scale synth production. That took a whole week. And then I started making. So these are kind of like sub mixes because I would do this in the drum mix, and then I would bounce out the drums and the synths, layered with those voices, and I would start making the actual mix sessions. And then from there, I started adding more synth elements played with like an iPad because I have a bunch of
Mhm.
software on an iPad as well. And then I also, for this release in particular, I bought it's called a stylophone. You heard of one of those?
Okay. No, what's that?
It's a very like primitive kind of synth. Um, the original is extremely primitive. You can play stuff like Twinkle Twinkle Little Star on it. But
Okay.
there's a version that came after it called the Gen X1 where it has some basic synth adjustments that you can do, and you can do other cool things like swells and stuff, like feedback swells. It's quite a bit more sophisticated. So I use that to bolster some things, and like I said, the iPad synths, and I used an automaton. Have you heard of that?
Mm-mm.
It's almost like a kid's toy, but it looks like an anime character basically, and it's like covered in rubber, and you squeeze it and it makes a sound. It's like a little ball with a face on it, and then it has like a I don't know what to call it. It's like fretless almost, like a little
Hmm.
keypad attached to it. It doesn't have frets or anything, so you can just slide up and down it.
Uh,
Play some glissando stuff, or you can play actual notes, and then an octave switch, so you can go an octave higher, octave lower. It definitely has I don't know singular kind of esoteric use, but I use that on a couple moments on the album, you know, drenched in reverb and other effects.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But so that was the second process, like adding all the iPad and other synths and other sound design stuff. Like with Finite II, I actually bought a really cheap violin and like just made noise on it and
Huh.
and used that in certain strategic spots. So I did the same thing here, and I played a little bit of bass sound design stuff, like just making noise on the bass again and adding
Mm-hmm.
effects or whatever to make things have a different texture or sound more interesting. So then this brings us to like mid to late January of this year. Then I went on tour with my band, Darkest Hour, the last tour we did before all this crap, you know, happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it was at that point that Cameron McClellan, who I've worked with extensively, he usually tracks the bass for all my stuff. He started tracking bass while I was on tour, and then he finished up shortly after I got back from tour. So like the first, second week of February, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So once he had the bass track, then I had the bass reamped by a gentleman named Anthony Giacomo, who reamped my bass on Redux and the last song on Delectable Machinery. Great set of ears. Nothing beats a good bass reamp.
Mm-hmm.
So then I had the bass, and then I started manipulating the bass, you know, EQing it, adding effects to supplement it here and there. And then Sophia tracked strings when she did the strings for Redux, which was, you know, like in March while we were in quarantine. So yeah, so then that whole time I was doing just revision after revision, just, you know,
Yeah,
boosting the bit, lots of automation, panning automation,
of
volume
course.
automation. Just I don't know.
And
There's a lot that encompasses it.
for sure. And I guess what I'm trying to get at here is how do you know when something is done? I mean, when you have this perfectionist attitude, I think it's safe to say, and I think pretty much any musician has got some of that. And then there's a certain point where you've got to stop and say it's ready. How do you know where that point is?
I don't know. It's just when the vision feels sated, I guess. I do have that switch that at some point it goes off and it's like, okay, this is done, and if I spend any more time on it, you know, it's the point of diminishing returns. It's just like no one's gonna hear the difference that I'm making here. I can barely hear the difference. Like, this is done. We can move on. So
Right,
I
for
don't know
sure.
when that kicks in, but at some point it kicks in, because if it didn't, I wouldn't have 10 albums.
Totally. Yeah, I've heard a great quote somewhere. I don't remember who said it, but it's something like great art is never finished. It's abandoned.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. But this
Yeah.
I probably spent like until that switch came on, that it probably took the longest for that switch to come on for this.
Yeah. Does that perfectionism, which I think has been like probably a big part of your success. I mean, I know for me personally, I always have that voice in the back of my head saying this could be better, and that drives us to be better. Does it ever get in the way with anything? Do you ever wish you could be more, I don't know, relaxed about stuff, musically speaking?
Huh. Interesting question. I don't think so, because, you know, if it was different, then I would probably be an entirely different person. And I feel
Right.
like so much of my my personality in general hinges on my musical expression, you know, whatever I'm working on. And so in turn, so much of my regular personality hinges on that as well. So I think it's
Hmm.
probably safe to say if that irksome voice was not there, then I wouldn't be the Travis Orbin that you know.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And speaking of personality, we talked briefly earlier about how you were apparently kicking in time in the womb, practicing your double bass chops before you were even born. Um, so I'm curious to know. I know this is an age-old discussion, and it's nobody really has an answer. But the role of talent and how much like innate gift, if you want to call it that, plays a role versus the work you do. Because you may have had that natural inclination towards rhythm where you're tapping on things as a kid all the time. But I also know that you have worked extremely diligently as well. So, what maybe percentage do you think? What is the role of talent versus work? And how would you define talent more importantly?
Hmm. I think talent is it's definitely secondary to the work, um, especially with a lot of the things that I try to achieve. They they don't usually come naturally to me,
Hmm.
so I really have to put in the hours. Um, I don't know. It's like you said. It's tough to define. It's a really blurred line where like the talent ends and the work kicks in. Especially at this point when I've been playing for almost 25 years, you know. But I don't know. I think my initial talent really just came in. I think it came in listening because
Mm.
even in my earliest bands when I was playing with people, I was always really conscious about listening to what people were playing. And when I
Mm.
started, when I was afforded the vehicle to be creative for the first time, like when I started writing original material with musicians, I would always cater my parts to what was going on. You know, I would try to come
Hmm.
up with some sort of signature fill, groove, pattern, and it was always contingent upon what the other people were playing. So I think that was an initial talent of mine,
Hmm.
and then from there it's just wherever my interests flourish. Like if it was double bass, I had to put in the work. If it was
Right.
independence, interdependence, I had to put in the work. If it was playing tuplets or whatever, then I had to put
Hmm.
in the work.
Right.
So I think, yeah, I don't know. I think, you know, being able to try to define what your talents are is worthwhile, but in the end you gotta put in the work.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, and yeah, I've always personally felt like I didn't have any talent on the drums. Like I felt like I had to work for every single pattern. Um,
Right.
and I've talked to some other well-known drummers that feel similarly, but I've also spoken to musicians that feel that they are talented, but often those ones that feel strongly that they have some kind of a gift seem to not do as much work, and therefore they are kind of mediocre. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it seems to me that there's obviously the common thread between those that excel is that they work hard. And it seems to me also that talent, perhaps, and this is also something I've spoken about with other musicians, that talent is not the ability to like just pop out of the womb and play paradiddles, like, or play a certain scale on an instrument. Like you don't have that skill pre-downloaded. It's like a talent is maybe more like in your case a perception thing where you're more tuned into, you're listening to things and you're noticing and taking notes about that. Or it's a
Yeah.
personality type where you can sit down and like really obsess over something. And I think
I agree.
maybe that's more what talent is than like, yeah, an actual musical specific skill. Because I think all that you gotta do the work.
A concept rather than an execution.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've seen videos online of like toddlers that have like almost perfect time.
Mm.
So it's just they're listening, you know. That's it's a
Right.
concept.
Huh.
And then once you have that, if you have that innate talent, you can apply that concept to execution, and then you know you can play things in time. But you
Right.
got to have that talent, and if you don't, then you have to develop it through work.
Right. Right. Cool. All right. I want to shift gears here a little bit. You have a very particular drum setup. Could you describe your drum setup and explain why it is the way it is?
Okay, well, I've said this before, but it's an open stance, the quasi open stance minimalist drum set.
Yes.
So I I've went through the big kit phase, like a lot of drummers, but I eventually grew out of it, and to this day, I basically play just a four piece. If I may add another drum if the music calls for it, but it's kind of a challenge, like a little mini challenge to try to orchestrate and make things as interesting as I can with just a four piece kit or as few voices as possible.
Hmm.
So back in the early 2000s, I was just gigging with a regular four or five piece kit with a conventional cymbal setup, and I got to a gig really late with my band, and on a whim, I just played with a three piece, just kick, snare, floor, and I liked it, but I wanted to add something to promote more left hand movement. And at the time, this made even more sense because I was doing a lot of like DIY style shows at like Elks Lodges and such,
Mm.
where it's just
Yeah, yeah,
there's no changeover time. It's just like
right.
you get on stage immediately and play, or people are going to leave. So so this is great because I always felt like even with just one rack time, I just felt like my playing always kind of suffered because I couldn't get it in place and with enough time. So with the left hand thing, it was much easier for whatever reason. And so I played this weird sort of what I have now, but with a conventional cymbal setup.
Hmm.
And then because I had always sort of flirted with open-handed playing, uh, I just decided to move the ride solely to the left, and then I added a second hi-hat. And I added that because my at the time my interest in double bass playing was growing, and I wanted to. It was a very mechanical decision to just stress the left foot. If I added this hi hat on the right, which was on a legless hi hat stand attached to the bass drum, so I could actually operate it. Close it, clamp it down. If I added this, then I would be forced to use the left foot.
Hmm.
So basically that implemented the setup that people kind of know me for, and it started out, as I said, as a really mechanical decision. But then I started to notice how Mike Mangini was using his cymbal voices. He would use the cymbals to complement the song, basically, like the chord progression or a melody. And so I took that concept and ran with it. Like I set my lowest pitch cymbals on the left and the highest pitch cymbals on the right. Like my ride and large crash are on the left. The larger hi hats are on the left. The higher pitch crash and China are on the right. The higher pitched hi hats are on the right.
Hmm.
So yeah, I just took that concept and included that into what I was doing, and but kept the strange sort of Bill Bruford-esque drum thing, even though he was not an
Yep.
influence. Like I acknowledge
Mm.
that he at one point he played a kit that looked kind of similar.
Right.
So
Right, with the cable hat in the middle.
right, yeah.
Yeah. And when was that exactly when you first flipped things around lefty, or you didn't flip things lefty, you just added the right hi-hat. Is that right?
Well, at one point I did shed on a left-handed kit. I had a left-handed kit set up in addition to my regular setup,
Ah,
and I don't remember exactly when that happened. It was definitely the early 2000s. I'm trying to think
okay.
like in relation to when the whole kit setup changed. I think it was just
Yeah.
somewhere in the midst of all that. Like I did that
Okay.
and I spent some
And
time on the
and
left hand.
and how long did it take you to get comfortable playing you know, lefty and right? Well, first of all, how equal do you feel your two sides are now? And I guess we could talk about that in terms of like physical technique and speed on one hand, and then coordination on the other.
Okay, well, my left foot is almost equal to my right. but my right still excels at doubles. And I think that
Mm,
just comes from all the years of, because I played for at least a solid decade before I started really implementing my left foot a lot, and always did a lot of quick doubles with my right foot.
yeah,
Usually that sliding motion, that was my
right.
go-to technique. So that is severely ingrained, and as a result, like my right foot doubles it, they've always been pretty blazing, and they definitely surpass my left. But other than that, they're pretty similar. And even when I'm improvising, like if I'm leading with my left hand on the left hats or right hand on the right hats, it doesn't seem to matter. Like
Mm,
there's no lag in creativity or anything of that sort. Like
mm-hmm.
whatever foot is leading, like the pattern that I'm trying to play or the groove, it's going to come out. But that kind of runs contrary to the hands, interestingly. Also with the
Hmm.
hands, the right is more adept than the left. I think it's probably just because I'm a righty naturally. Um,
Yeah.
I really have to work to get the left hand up to par with whatever like I'm trying to do.
Mm,
If I'm trying to match the right in some regard. For
yeah.
instance, like
Yeah.
I did a Miles Davis cover, and there's this
Mm-hmm.
bridge section where the upright bass is taking a solo and the left hand is playing the traditional jazz ride pattern, and it's just like
Mm-hmm.
a million miles an hour, and my right hand does it for the majority of the song, but then on the bridge my left hand does it, and it's just like I really had to put in the work to be able to do that.
Yeah.
So anyway, random example, but
Yeah.
uh but when it comes to improvisation, it's strange. It's like my right has a better flow of ideas. It's just able to string together combinations more efficiently, and I guess
Mm-hmm.
perhaps it's more muscle memory driven, and that's why it's it's easier. I don't
Yeah.
know, but the left
Yeah.
hand, I really, whenever I'm improvising, I really have to think about the next thing that I'm gonna do. Basically, I can let
Gotcha.
it flows, but like I don't know if I'm. It depends on the pattern that I'm going after. Like
Yeah.
if I'm gonna play some sort of ostinato with the left hand, then I really gotta think.
Right. But this is for improvisation. If you're playing
Yeah.
something you've written a part, then it's once you've practiced it, rehearsed it, it's essentially it feels like the right side
Mm-hmm.
in both.
Yep. That's correct.
And yeah, how long did it take you to get to that point? I'm curious about this because I recently flipped my kit lefty for a month at the beginning of this lockdown period. And I was thinking about like I've dabbled with open-handed playing for many years as well. And I got to the point where I can play this is like I don't know 5 or 6 years ago where I was playing gigs like rock gigs lefty. I mean, not lefty but open-handed with the left hand on the hi-hat
Yeah.
without too much problem, but I had issues with like the nuances of the ghost notes and stuff. It just wasn't as flowy as the right side.
Right.
Yeah, especially when improvising. But then when I flipped my kit around and just spent like an entire month focusing on just that, I made a lot of progress. And I was like, wow, amazing how that works. When you practice, you get better at something. But, um, you know, it made me question some of my assumptions that I had about open-handed playing because I'd kind of given it up, thinking like, "Why am I doing this? I could be practicing other things in place of this." Like, it's objectively better to play open-handed. Like, there's so many benefits, but it seemed to me at the time that the cost was too high, and so I've been trying to hone in on what the true cost of it is because I think it might be lower than a lot of people expect. For example, I think if it takes you a month to learn a certain set of coordination things with the right side, it won't take you a month to learn the left side. I think a lot of the work transfers. It'll actually take you less time to acquire some of that. Now, I think if you're a total beginner, that's the best case scenario where you can you could choose either path, and it. I don't think it would take that much longer. I think it becomes a little bit harder once you are experienced because you have to fight against your old habits.
Yeah.
What would you say to all that? Like, what would be your estimation, like, for how much extra time it takes to develop like something you've done?
Well, for me, I started flirting with open-handed playing not long after I started drumming,
Mm,
because I was a fan of Dennis Chambers and Carter Beauford, and Dennis kind of seamlessly switches between them. He mostly
yeah.
plays cross-handed, I guess, but there's definitely some open-handed stuff there. And Carter is strictly open-handed. So it's always been something I'd kind of mess with, and when I started really practicing hard, like shortly after I graduated high school, um, it kind of became a challenge. Like I'd stumble into some kind of
Mm,
cool thing playing cross-handed, and then I'd have to replicate it,
mm,
leading with the left. And I took into account all those nuances, like the ghost notes and everything. I tried to make them sound the same that they did when I was leading with the right. And I think that that attention to detail and all the
mm,
nuances kind of carried over into when I, you know, play the way that I play now, basically. So
right.
it's tough for me to like
Mm,
quantify exactly
yeah, fair enough.
how long it would take someone, but I think what you said was fair to say. Like if it's a beginner and they're starting, they're tackling open-handed strictly, or they're, you know, trying it out alongside cross-handed, I think they're more prone to learn something more quickly, or not quickly, but it won't take longer as opposed to when you have to break those habits.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Nice.
But I agree with you. I think it's
Mm.
everyone should give it a shot, and it just feels so good. It feels so much
and
better than playing cross-handed, man.
and it's yeah, it absolutely does for sure, 100%. And it's also very satisfying to watch somebody
Yeah.
like you that's like, oh wow, this is like he's got this thing down. So your album Finite 3 is, I guess, out now. It will be by the time this reaches the internet.
July
What other
3rd.
July 3rd?
Yeah.
There you go, and you can get that on your Bandcamp or
Bandcamp.
everywhere.
If you go to my website, I have a link to my web stores. I also sell CDs out of a Big Cartel web store, and it'll be streaming worldwide via all the usual stuff.
Cool. And so what other stuff are you working on at the moment? I know it's kind of a big question mark for the music industry at large right now, but do you have tours maybe plans that I mean, I have tours planned, but we don't know if we can do them. But yeah, what's next for you here?
Okay, well, I'm going to be recording the second half of Projects 3, as I mentioned, and I'm also working on another full length. I had written 5 songs last year in a method that's totally, I guess you could say, antithetical to what I had been doing, like
Mm,
most of the computer composing that I had been doing. I wrote a bunch of material on an actual bass or a synth app, just full
mm.
noodling around with synth on an iPad or whatever. And I wrote 5 songs like that, and then now I'm writing 4 more to add to it. And so it's probably going to be a full length. And I tracked the drums for the original 5 earlier this year, and then I tracked the bass and synths, basic iPad synths for it as well. But another thing that kind of sets this apart is that it'll have vocals. Oh
Oh,
God.
wow.
So
You singing?
yeah, I'm gonna try my best. But
Nice.
the original 5, I once I finished the demos in, I wrote them, like I said, on actual instruments, but then I actually transcribed everything in Guitar Pro, so I had some working MIDI demos. I bounced those out, and then I did vocal pre-pro on them for the first time in my life, which was, kind of underwhelming, but
Yeah.
it still helped me find some melodies and such. And so, but that doing that also affected the arrangements a little bit. So I'm going to do that again to these 4, and see where that takes me. And then once I have the arrangements 100% dialed in, I'll track the drums, bass, iPad synths for that. And then at some point, I would like to drive to Chicago to my friend Gabriel Riccio's house. He is a vocalist, and I've worked with him extensively on my solo stuff. He does a lot of mobile tracking slash producing for me. Whenever
Mhm.
I like, he does all of Sophia's uh, violin sessions, and then he's done a bunch of
Mm.
others. He did the marimba vibraphone session for me for Redux. Does a bunch of stuff. He's kind of like a man behind the scenes for me.
Cool.
But he's a vocalist himself, has been for years. It's one of his main axes as a multi instrumentalist, and we have a lot of shared aesthetic interests. Like, we have a lot of similar music interests and such. So and he has just a laser like ear and attention to detail when it comes to music. Like, he can transcribe
Mm.
anything. He
Hmm.
actually has been commissioned to do work for Trey Gunn from King
Mhm.
Crimson and other people. So
Nice.
he's a professional transcriptionist by trade as well. So I definitely entrust him when it comes to co-producing the vocals for this stuff. So at some point, hopefully this year, I'll drive to Chicago and track the vocals for these 9 songs with him. So that's another album that I'm working on. And then I have a side project with Gabe and a bunch of other friends, Sophia as well, called, kind of a naughty name, but it's called Logical Phalluses.
Mhm.
And it's basically an anything goes kind of musical project. There's no singular genre that we try to adhere our composition to. It's kind of like almost kind of Mr. Bungle-esque, just like, or
Mhm.
Frank Zappa-esque. Just anything goes, kind of crude and crass at times, whatever. Um, so we've been working slowly, piecing together a full length. So hopefully at some point this summer I'll start to track the drums for that. And then as far as touring, Darkest Hour, we have a tour tentatively planned in December, and we might do something depending on what phase Washington D.C. is at. We might do something in September to like a really small amount of
Mhm.
people to
Right.
commemorate the band's anniversary. It's going to be the band's 25th anniversary, believe it or
Oh,
not.
nice. Right on.
So I think, and then I have some session stuff. I always have some session things kicking around. I just
Definitely.
posted a video today of a new artist that I've been working with called Sunset Cloak.
Uh-huh.
So I think that's everything.
Nice. Well, you have accomplished a lot. I mean, in this last month alone, but over the span of the last decade or two. Um, do you ever feel like you've arrived or you've done enough and I mean, you've accumulated so much skill. I mean, do you ever think about doing something else, like learning a new instrument or another skill, or are you just in it for the long game with the drums?
Well, when it comes to drums, I'm always going to get off on challenging myself.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, whatever, if it's something super athletic or super cerebral, like, that's always going to be an ongoing thread in my life. Like, because it's just, that was my first like doing this for life passion. Like, I don't.
Yeah.
If I can't play drums, I'm going to be one depressed son of a bitch.
Absolutely.
But I noodle around on the bass, and then I'm gonna have to get my vocal chops up to this
Mm.
record that I've talked about. So like composition, production, synth production, sound design, like all those are pretty recent interests of mine. But I find myself really enthralled by that whole world as well. So
Hmm.
I'm definitely in it. I'm in all of it for the long haul.
Yeah, for sure. Constant learning.
Yes. I think my friend Pete Peterson made a tweet a while ago, said, if you're not, I'm gonna butcher it. I'm definitely paraphrasing him. It's like, if you're not learning, oh damn it, I can't remember it. If you're not learning or doing something else, you're doing it wrong. I can't fill in the blank, but I definitely
Yeah.
agree with that sentiment.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Well, I think that's a good place to end it here. Is there anything else you wanted to share with people?
a good place to end it on an incomplete quote.
The internet will find the
No,
right one. It's fine.
nothing else. Just thanks for lending me your ears, and hope you check out what I've done if you haven't, and if you do, I appreciate it. Appreciate your time.
Awesome. So you can find Travis and all of his music on YouTube, on Bandcamp, and on all of the usual services. Check out his album, Finite III, which is available now. And thanks for watching. And thanks for being here, Travis.
Thanks for having me, Shawn.